to call, or you can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. I want to talk to Fox Fisher, who is a filmmaker and a trans activist. And I want to know, are you there, Fox? Hello?
Hi, Lucy. Can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you loud and clear.
Marvelous.
I'm still very curious about that, and that's because I'm not trans, and I worry that I don't have the right language, that I don't know how to ask the right questions. Am I alone in that, do you think? Is that still an ongoing problem?
Lucy, you're not alone at all. I mean, don't forget that all trans people, we weren't born knowing the language or the vocabulary, so we're all learning as we go along as well. And of course, language is also evolving. So, words that we used perhaps 5 years ago or might have been acceptable 5 years ago has a different meaning now, or, we've advanced. So a lot of people actually just refer to themselves as trans, for example. So we've kind of almost dropped transsexual, transgender, and so forth, and we're kind of opting for a shorter term. That's not everyone. I can't speak for everyone, but that does seem to be the consensus.
And when sorry, can I just ask you, have you transitioned? Have you gone through the whole process, or?
I suppose there's no end point as such.
Oh, is that right? Is there no end point?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you define as transgender, but I would imagine that somebody is acknowledged for the gender that they define as, regardless of surgery and hormones and so forth. So it's a personal journey, and of course not everyone can afford treatment and so forth. So people in the public eye like Caitlyn Jenner, Kelly Maloney, that you were talking about, they are, I think, they're very positive in many respects, because it helps the general public to have a reference point of what it's like to be trans, but they could never represent anyone from the trans community because they have access to a lot of money and a position of power and influence as well.
Yes, because not all of us are going to end up on Vanity Fair as soon as we make some kind of public declaration about ourselves.
I know. I'm gutted about that. I'll never be on Vanity Fair.
I'm waiting for the call. Exactly. Well, if you get there first, I might come along and, sort of hold the lights or something. But what about when you first began to tell people that you wanted to identify in a particular way? What kind of reactions did you get?
Okay, so I'll walk you through it. For me, I transitioned later in life, and I do believe that people are doing this less and less, that people are recognizing who they are, and luckily there's more things in place, more support groups, more awareness, so that people can actually start to live their lives. For me, I think I'm almost part of the last batch of people that kind of and ahed about it. And it was because of fears about what people would think. It was about, worrying about how am I going to fit this into my life, and what if I do this, and what if I'm not happy? That's also a massive question too. So.
So how old are you? How old were you when you started to talk about it with other people?
When I first, looking back, it's really, really obvious. If I look back at my childhood now, it's just so clear that I was just always uncomfortable. I was kind of deemed the black sheep of the family, even though my only issues really were around wearing female attire, and I felt so uncomfortable in that. So I was deemed a difficult child, but I really wasn't, So it would have changed my childhood completely if my parents had known that it was, possible to transition, and that this was an actual thing.
And how are they now?
My parents are very supportive now, but at first, my mum was not supportive at all, because she had a lot of worries about my safety, about how I would become, who would love me. She had lots and lots of questions. Oh. And it just took a long time. And it took about maybe a year or so, and I was getting to the point of having my first surgery, so my top surgery, where I was going to get a male sculpted chest, and I booked everything and just assumed that I was going to have to kind of go over there alone. And last minute, she booked her flight, and I was just so pleased that
oh my goodness
that happened. So yeah, it was a real surprise.
And do you think it is a bit of a generational thing, that actually, the generation coming up now, they will just see trans, they probably won't even see it. They'll be trans blind, so to speak, in the same way as, generation in South Africa is now kind of colourblind in a way that their parents weren't?
Well, perhaps. I mean, that'd be very lovely, I think, in some ways. But I mean, gender is an expression, and gender expression is a human right. So, no matter how you want to express yourself, I think people do have the right to do that. And, for example, there's what was in the press recently, the Brighton Hove College. They had an article that came out a few days ago about school uniforms, and they made the press because they were allowing their students to decide whatever uniform they want to wear, so, a skirt or trousers. And, for me personally, I was traumatized at school for wearing tights and skirts. But it did give me great empathy as well. So I think this thing with the schools, allowing students to wear whatever uniform they want and that making the news, that's almost an indication that we're not really there yet, because for me, that should be the case across the board. And I've helped a few students come out at schools as well. And it's just such an incredible process. But for every one child that's coming out at a school of 1,000 perhaps, there's at least 9 other students that are statistically would be trans.
So finally, Fox, what do you think would help society understand more about the trans world? That given, as you say, that it's, there is no one size fits all for any of us, least of all within the trans community. But so what would really help? Is it just more and more Caitlyn Jenners and Kelly Malones and Nadia from Big Brother? Do we need more role models, or is it more about education in schools and things?
I think we need both, perhaps. We definitely need education in schools, because then it goes from the bottom up, and we're going to breed a generation of clued up individuals. But to have role models is really important. But I'd like to see more trans people stepping up in the media, so more trans journalists. And then ultimately, the future is trans people not being acknowledged for being trans in particular. They're being acknowledged for being, an incredible athlete or a great filmmaker.
And of course, that could actually happen with the announcement, or the revelation today that there may be moves afoot within the Rio Olympics to allow trans athletes to take place. That actually people, as you say, people won't see them as with a label. It will just be they did a really good job doing what they were doing.
I think that's very interesting. I suppose people have issues with trans athletes because of perhaps the supplements that trans people might be taking, hormones for medical transition. But otherwise, I really can't see why trans people wouldn't be allowed to compete in their category. It can be kind of tricky, I suppose, for people to make a distinction. And I don't know much about the subject, but I think conversations about this is obviously the most important thing, and that's what's going on at the moment. It seems every day there's a new article in the press. I work with an organisation called All About Trans that's absolutely phenomenal, and they work a lot with tabloid newspapers and BBC, various channels, to just give gatekeepers a human reference point of what it's like to be trans. And because of that, headlines, Sun newspaper headlines have been talked about, and the online articles have been taken down, and we've progressed a lot with, we're not using clunky phrases like sex swap, sex op, born a man, born a woman anymore. Well, I think it is still happening, but it's becoming less and less.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Fox. That's Fox Fisher there, who is a filmmaker and trans activist, but who also has some very strong views about whether society actually has woken up to what really trans actually means. Do you agree with Fox? Do you think that actually there is a long way to go, but we're making so much progress, particularly if you've got things like the Brighton College doing away with a girl's uniform and a boy's uniform, but actually having a skirt uniform and trouser uniform, specifically to enable trans pupils to feel more comfortable in their choices? Would that have helped you when you were a child at school? Or did you notice at school that there were people who were being bullied because they just didn't fit in? Or, as Fox was identified, the problem child? 034